Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast. It's Wednesday, March 26th. I am Bart Warner, Town Manager for Bedford, and I'm your host for this episode and all other broadcasts, brought to you by our media partners with Media Squatch, whom we appreciate very much. And of course, the primary purpose of this show is to provide a recap of the activities of Town Council, who met last night, and maybe a little bit deeper dive into the specific information behind the discussions. And so with that, I'm going to jump right in and work through the agenda as I share information with you. One of the first administrative items at every meeting is approval of the minutes, which I want to make sure people know we do post the written minutes of every meeting on our website as soon as they are approved. So those are available for your perusal. I will tell you that both staff and council frequently go back and reference those to see what's happening. Of course, our website is www.bedfordva.gov. And the minutes can be found in the government and town council sections of the website. Next is my report to the council, and also really more for the benefit of the public. Last night I mentioned, and I'll remind folks in this venue, that Spring Cleanup Week is scheduled to take place on April 7th through 11th. This is a semi-annual event that largely involves the pickup of bulk goods at the curbside for customers who pay the refuse collection fee. If you have specific questions about the service, I would encourage you to contact our Public Works Department directly at 540-587-6081. The other thing I announced last night was the addition of a new member of our management team at the town. I am pleased to announce that James D. Moore has accepted an offer to become the next Chief of Police for the town of Bedford. Jim will be coming to us directly from the Chesterfield County Police Department, where he serves on the command staff as Leadership Development Training Coordinator. He has 36 years of professional leadership experience at all levels of law enforcement, including local, state, and federal. Jim will be joining us officially on Monday, April 7th, and we will host a swearing-in ceremony at 10 o'clock a.m. that day in the council chambers at 215 East Main Street. And of course, that's an event that the public is welcome to attend, and you can meet Chief Moore directly. We're also issuing a press release today to provide more details about Jim's background and also our process. But one thing I'll say is we have a tremendous police department full of well-qualified, well-trained, and highly serving folks. And one of the main things that stood out about Jim was, first, his recognition of that fact and his ability to develop and train officers. Among many positive aspects of Jim's background is he is recognized throughout the Commonwealth as a trainer of police officers and leadership positions in police departments. He also has a special focus on small police departments, and so we think that's going to be valuable. In addition, one other thing I'll mention about Jim is in his role at Chesterfield County, he has developed a leadership training academy program that, again, is widely recognized throughout the Commonwealth, and my understanding is there's been a waiting list to get in on it. Jim's going to be bringing that to Bedford, and in addition to bringing folks into the community to receive training, our staff's going to benefit from that, and Jim also advises he's going to use that as a recruiting tool for our department. Moving on to council comments last night. We had a pretty full agenda. Also, somewhat unusually, we had a pretty good level of personal attendance, and all 7 members of council recognized the people who were there in the building with them and in the room and expressed their appreciation for their attendance. Councilman Dave Foster expanded that a little bit to note that he noticed some younger people in the crowd, and he thought that was particularly good. Mayor Stanley gave a shout out to former Mayor Tim Black, who was with us last night. And CG also noted that our finance director, Ann Cantrell, was recently recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association with a significant scholarship award. Again, Ann is another member of our leadership team who is extremely talented, well-versed in what she does, and we are very fortunate to have her expertise and very grateful that she chooses to work with us. The next item is a report of council committees, which there have been none. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that immediately prior to the council meeting, there was a work session involving all members of council focused on our park facilities. You may or may not know that the town owns several properties. 9 specific properties are managed as recreational space to some degree or another. Perhaps the most visible is Liberty Lake Park, located off Brooks Hill Road, but there are also some other sites that have previously or currently serve as recreational facilities that we brought to council's attention and basically wanted to start the ball rolling with them to talk about our priorities in terms of maintenance and programming and future use of those. So council spent a couple of hours talking in detail, asking questions about what we're doing there. And again, that information is going to be utilized as your town council is working on strategic efforts to plan for the future, respond to your concerns, and make sure that we handle things in an efficient and appropriate manner. Moving on to the agenda, we had a public hearing last night related to budget amendments for fire apparatus replacement and additional VDOT funding. The public hearing relates to a budget amendment of about $1.7 million towards the upcoming purchase of fire apparatus. And specifically, we're talking about a ladder truck that is scheduled to be replaced in 2027 and a pumper truck that is scheduled to be replaced as part of our capital improvement program. We also received an additional $400,000 in funding from VDOT, and that relates back to the annexation that occurred just a couple of years ago. We use VDOT funding to take on a lot of activities that are regulated by VDOT standards. Probably the most visible you'll see is resurfacing of roads. We do our best to maintain roads in the best possible condition. We know there are potholes and things such as weather that affect that, and we try to respond to that on an as-needed basis. But on a broader level, we try to make sure we stay ahead of those issues by taking the time to get ahead of them and resurfacing some roads that may not have received attention. We do have an ongoing rolling schedule. I can tell you that we can't resurface all the roads every year on a practical basis, both in terms of workload and budget. So we do have a program. This year's focus is in one of the areas that was taken in a couple years ago, and that's the North Hill subdivision. Of course, one of the services we provide is road maintenance, which we do think we provide at an enhanced level. And one thing we noticed was the roads there probably had not been touched in quite a while. And we're not criticizing the previous tenants of that service because we know they are stretched pretty thin in terms of their obligations. But one primary focus this year of the repaving is going to be getting a fresh surface of roads on all of the streets in the North Hills neighborhood. That will involve some inconvenience to our neighbors, so wanted to make sure you're aware of that. But also we're hoping that the overlay will serve well and provide a good road surface for people to travel on that won't require a lot of attention moving forward. We're also looking to make some stormwater system improvements. Again, I'll note that we had a recent rain event about a month or so ago in which we got an inch of rain within about 20 minutes, and our systems are designed to keep the streets clear and passable, although in situations like that, sometimes we do have flash flooding. In that particular instance, I was in town and noted it. It was on a Saturday evening. I will tell you anecdotally, my front yard was underwater, which hasn't happened before, so I knew we had some issues. But I did note within an hour that there was still some standing water, but after going back a little bit later, that was gone. And you don't see it, but the drop inlets and storm drains that we have are designed to digest rainfall and to make sure the streets are passable, even in those extreme events. In this case, for a little while, we had some issues with the roads themselves, but after a couple hours, in most cases, the system performed as designed. Since that involved a change to our budget, we required some public input on that. However, last night there was no one who spoke at the public hearing. The next item of new business was our consent agenda, which consisted of a request to close streets submitted by the Bedford Boys Tribute Center. They are requesting permission to hold a wreath-laying ceremony in front of the county courthouse on Friday, June 6th, and to close Main Street from the North Bridge Street red light east to South Street from 5:45 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. They will provide appropriate notice to first responders who may have to kind of work around that for that time. A little bit of background there too. Bedford Boys Tribute Center, of course, is managed by Ken and Linda Parker, who have made it their mission to preserve the legacy of the young men from Bedford who gave their lives as part of the first wave of D-Day, and also to educate people on the backgrounds of those specific men and their families, which is just really personal and heart-touching information, but to educate and to keep the information alive that is relevant and continues to be relevant from generation to generation. And they do that in a very personalized and special way. So I will say, if you have not visited the Bedford Boys Tribute Center on North Bridge Street, please stop by there. It's certainly a worthwhile experience. Town Council unanimously adopted that request. And again, that event will take place on June 6th from 5:45 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. in front of the courthouse on East Main Street. The next item of new business was a proclamation concerning National Crime Victims' Rights Week, Kinship, Connection, and Healing. Mayor Stanley read the proclamation and presented that to a local advocate. And I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, if you weren't at the meeting or didn't watch the live broadcast, to go back and view that on our YouTube offerings, and you can get the entire text of the proclamation. The next item of new business was the actual budget amendment for the fire apparatus replacement. Again, we're talking about replacing the ladder truck used by Company 1, as well as an engine that is housed in the Bedford Fire Department on Bedford Avenue. The total cost to replace the ladder truck is $2.2 million, and the total cost to replace the fire engine is $1.1 million. Fortunately, the County Board of Supervisors has a policy whereby they offset that cost and contribute towards it. Of course, the Bedford Fire Department is located within town and serves the town, but also provides quite a bit of service to the central area of the county. And frankly, I'll tell you, our fire staff, again, dedicated, committed group of folks, frequently respond to assist other companies outside of their direct territory or to provide coverage while they're out responding to calls. It's a very good working relationship, very tough job, and it's performed largely by volunteers. One of the commitments that both the town and the county attempt to make is to make sure they have the best possible equipment that they need, of course, at an efficient and affordable manner. The total cost of the ladder truck and the fire truck, again, exceeds $3 million. What we are essentially doing is putting aside money ahead of time so we can pay cash for those when the bill comes, and that's what we were doing last night. Essentially, we were executing transfers from our fund balance, which is the county's cash position, to the line items used to purchase these items when the time comes. And of course, that's something we've been planning for. So the cash was already there. We're just making a firm commitment to put it into the expenditure account so we can proceed with actually getting these pieces of apparatus when they are available. And of course, the county also contributes to that. We're grateful for that. In case you're curious, they are contributing $857,000 towards the purchase of the ladder truck and $777,000 towards the purchase of the fire engine. And I did double check and to make sure what I'm about to say is correct. They're really under no obligation to do so. So this is a matter of good intergovernmental cooperation. They have a standard that guides their level of contribution that they meet. And from my perspective, certainly I appreciate our colleagues in the county and the relationships we have with them. Councilman Haley made the motion to approve the budget transfer request. That was seconded by Vice Mayor Updike, and it was unanimously approved by all members of council. The next item of new business dealt with the budget amendments to accept the money from VDOT that I just talked about a couple of minutes ago, and also to allocate that to the specific expenditure line items so we can actually get the pavers out there to resurface the roads and engage the work to install the stormwater infrastructure that we need to update and or improve. That was in a total amount of $409,000. Vice Mayor Updike made the motion to approve the budget amendment. That was seconded by Councilman Dwight Evans, and that motion was unanimously approved. The next item of new business relates to what we think is an exciting development in town. That is the construction of a Hampton Inn business class hotel, which will be located on Berks Hill Road. D-Day Omstay Limited Liability Corporation is the entity that is building that hotel. They will have it constructed and they will run it. In order to do that, they entered into a performance agreement with both the town council and the town economic development authority. There were certain considerations and incentives given for this project as a part of that agreement, but maybe the practical item of most importance is when will the project be undertaken and completed. They've had a little bit of trouble based on weather with some soils issues. In fact, that's been delayed because as much as they'd love to get their graders in there moving things, the ground's too wet and hasn't been conducive to construction activity in the winter months, which has delayed that project a bit. Basically, what they were asking for was to amend the agreement given their start dates related to the delays they experienced. The project was slated to start based on the performance agreement on March 31st. Knowing that they're a little bit behind, they gave council notice and requested that be extended to September 30th. Of course, their intention is to start that ahead of September 30th. As soon as everything's dry and they can do what they need to do to meet the standards, they will move. In fact, Mr. Amit Patel, who's a principal with Omstay, noted that they intend to have that initial work completed by August, but they're giving themselves a month of contingency based on unforeseen circumstances. The other element of the performance agreement relates to the completion date for the project. And again, that might be what folks are most interested in. The original agreement said that the hotel would be up and running as of August 30th, 2026. Again, based on the current delays, the developer asked that be extended to December 31st, 2026. The developers gave a presentation prior to a motion made by council, providing greater explanation of what's going on there, the challenges, and the opportunities associated with that. Again, I encourage you to view that on our YouTube offering if you are so inclined. After that presentation, Councilman Jay Ippolito made a motion to accept the amendment to the performance agreement. That was seconded by Councilman Dave Foster and unanimously approved by all members of council. The next item of business related to a request from the developer of the Hampton Inn Hotel related to our electric costs to provide electric connections and services to the new hotel site. Again, we discussed this a little bit in the last meeting as well, but Bedford operates its own electric utility, and in cooperation with developers and new development, most of the time, there's an arrangement whereby the utility provider connects the meter portion of the property and the service area of the property directly to the service point, which is typically a transformer. That is a service that is typically performed by the utility company. Of course, that's covered by the rates and fees that we charge, and in this case, it's covered by a fee. The cost to provide that service in this case for the hotel was quoted as being $65,300. And since the developers had negotiated certain incentives previously, they approached council to request that that cost would be waived by the Bedford Electric. That cost quoted by the Bedford Electric Department could be waived and absorbed by the town. There was quite a bit of discussion related to that request. Council ultimately made a motion to approve the request so they could discuss it. And the discussion of council members was that they're willing to consider it at a later time depending on the progress of the project itself. And that's relevant because, again, we're talking about a cost associated with the end of the project. We recently had a discussion related to the middle school project, which is at that phase, and related to that cost as well. So, again, council made it clear that they are excited about the project. They're very pleased with the plans to move forward, and they're willing to consider it down the road, but they would like to see some more information and some more progress. The motion to approve the request was made by Vice Mayor Updike. It was seconded by Councilman Haley. That motion was unanimously defeated. Again, there are several procedural hurdles that we have to clear in most of our deliberations, which are designed for transparency and accountability. So the council, even though the motion was to approve the request, based on their conversations, council unanimously voted to deny it. And what that means is it's still open for discussion, but they're waiting to see for more progress and activity on the site. The next item of new business related to the town's commercial solid waste collection service. This is an entirely budget-driven issue. We are currently in the process of developing our budget proposal for fiscal year 25-26, which will take effect July 1st. There are a few details that we're trying to address, one of which is there is a $750,000 annual revenue we're receiving from the county as part of the reversion process that ends in 2028. So that's kind of looming before us, and we're trying to find ways to get ahead of that so it doesn't impact us all at one time. I will tell you our approach to that is multifaceted. One is that we are looking to reduce our costs to the greatest extent possible and improve our efficiencies. I'm going to come back to that because it relates to this particular matter. The second is to look at increases in revenues. One of those is proposing to re-implement the business professional license tax that was in place up until 2013 and that we did away with for a period of about 10 years. Basically, the businesses had something of a holiday where they didn't pay that tax, but we're trying to gradually get that back in a way that's reasonable and does not burden our businesses too much to chip away at that $750,000 figure. We also have money in the bank, about $4.3 million in our unrestricted net assets. We have to be careful with that, though, and we're doing our best to build up our reserves, if you view it that way, just in case there are unanticipated costs or consequences. And again, we know that the $750,000 will go away in 2028. The other aspect of that I'll mention to you is that the town has been working to avoid taking on debt, and our debt service that is locally owned or related to town activities will be gone within the next 2 years. So one good aspect of the losing the revenue is that we will also be debt free. That combination of things is our approach to meeting that $750,000 gap that we will face. Getting back immediately, that relates to looking at our current operations. Solid waste collection in Bedford is a little bit complicated. There are basically two sets of collection services provided. One, which is residential, that's your curbside canister at your home or your apartment, as the case may be, that the town collects on a weekly basis. We charge a fee for that, which covers our collection cost. We are allowed to dispose that at the county landfill at no cost based on a provision of the reversion agreement that was negotiated back in 2013. So that is an immediate savings for us in terms of that collection cost. I will note that it does provide an expenditure burden for the county, and as county residents, we certainly need to be sensitive to that fact. It is an arrangement that might be viewed as advantageous to the town. There are provisions within the reversion agreement that spell out the manner in which the county could end that arrangement. So there's the check and balance there. Again, if you receive trash service, if you've opted in, or if you have not opted out, for $25 a month, you receive the residential trash service, which includes monthly pickup as well as bulk items, and also including our spring cleanup week, which is coming up April 7th. You pay $25 a month for that. It shows up on your utility bill. Unless you have an additional can, we charge $3 for that additional service, and we're able to do that. I can tell you from a budget perspective, the residential collection service is in very good financial shape. Of course, we owe a great deal of that to the arrangement with Bedford County, whereby we don't pay tipping fees to dispose of it. So that's an item of transparency that we need to bring to your attention. But last year, the solid waste fund overall broke even, and we found that our fees for residential service are meeting our costs and allowing us to do some future planning. What's relevant to that is we know of about 400 residential housing units that could be built at any given time within town limits, and we will be responsible for serving those customers. Again, we try to be as efficient and maximize our resources to the greatest extent possible. Frankly, our collection staff, it's not really specific people dedicated to picking up the trash all the time. They actually perform other tasks for Public Works in addition to collecting your solid waste. So, in addition to driving the truck, getting the cans emptied, and getting that trash disposed, oftentimes those folks complete that shift and then go to work on mowing, maintaining parks, and looking at sidewalks. So again, that's the efficiency and the dedication of our Public Works folks that I want to recognize, that we appreciate. But we are starting to reach some limits on that based on the fact that we're spreading those folks thin already. Again, we took in several new customers just a couple of years ago with the annexation. We found that we were able to absorb that, and at current levels, based on today's data, we're able to provide that at a functional, optimal level of service financially. But there are going to be greater demands placed on that service as new development occurs. Now, of course, those residents would also be paying the $25 fee, which offsets that. What we're looking at is to make sure that that fee matches the effort required and the cost associated with providing that service. That's probably more than anyone ever wanted to know about the finances of residential trash collection. But I have to make that distinction because we also currently offer collection to non-residential customers specifically commercial customers, in exactly the same fashion. And in fact, it's oftentimes the same personnel. In that case, we are finding that we're struggling to keep up with our costs. There are a number of factors related to that. We talked about this last night too. So a lot of what I'm telling you as background was also recapped in last night's meeting. But there's the manpower issue where they're, in addition to residential, they're also doing the commercial pickup. Given the growth in residential accounts, that's becoming a practical issue. There is also the matter of a surcharge that the county collects from us related to residential trash disposal. Although the agreement is pretty clear that the town should not be charged any fees, the county has argued for years that since we are involved in both residential and commercial trash disposal, that there's probably some commingling of the two. We don't have a really great response to that. It's not a huge financial issue, but as a practical matter, it's a problem that we'd like to get resolved. So the proposal in the budget, which was non-specific, was that the town should get out of the commercial solid waste service. What I'm telling you right now as background is the reasons behind that proposal. So first off, even though we're not supposed to be charged for residential trash collection, there is still some expenditure there that we would like to address as a practical matter and do away with. There's the manpower issue that I talked about. The single biggest cost of that service is the fact that since we can't take that anywhere for free, we have to be intelligent about playing the available markets. So what that means is collecting that trash means we have to take it to some facility and pay tipping fees. What we found, again, Bedford County's tipping fees are a little more expensive than some of their neighbors. That's not a criticism at all. We understand the pressures placed on that. We also understand that we play a part in that, given the residential development. But because we're still trying to serve the town's purposes, we have found that Pittsylvania County actually offers lower tipping fees. Of course, Pittsylvania County is farther away than Bedford County. So the issue there is how we get the trash to them. Well, the good news is we have a partnership negotiated by our prior Public Works Director, D.W. Lawhorn, who coincidentally now works for the county, whereby Bay's Trash Removal collects our commercial trash and combines it with theirs and hauls it to Pittsylvania County for us at no charge. So basically, we have no hauling cost on the commercial side, just like we don't pay a tipping fee on the residential side. And that's very valuable. Now, Pittsylvania County, again, facing inflationary pressures, has advised that they were going to be raising their tipping fees. So we know that as a result, we're likely going to have to pass that cost along. And since that cost is shared overall in the solid waste fund, that could find its way to impact residential customers as well. The point at which Bays gets our trash and we deliver it to is a transfer station located on Orange Street. Given the way our operation works currently and the manner in which we are highly leveraging our costs to get the best deal, we have to have that transfer station, which requires quite a bit of operational investment. That is specific to the commercial waste collection business. And our annual costs as of today are $319,812. Of course, we recover that by our fees, but the fees we charge only collect revenues of $81,343. So effectively, our costs for collecting the 200 or so commercial accounts is about $152 a month, but we're only charging on average $33 a month per account. So obviously, on a straight line item, bottom line basis, we recognize that a change needs to be made. Council had a work session on February 22nd dealing with the budget where we talked about this. And again, this does relate to several factors beyond outright efficiency. There's the matter of the $750,000 burden that we're facing. If we don't collect the solid waste ourselves, we then can do something different with the transfer station. And that's important, mainly as part of internal discussions. Happy to go into greater details there, but if we're no longer in the commercial trash business, we no longer are required to have that facility. And that would then give us the freedom to negotiate with other parties who may be interested and who may need that. And we'll be looking out for the town's interest there, certainly. Basically, that means we'll have an asset that's worth something that we can leverage, and that's what we intend to do. The first step, however, is to get out of the commercial solid waste collection business. The guidance that staff had given council back in February was that we need to end that collection service based on the cost-benefit analysis we performed. That was fairly nonspecific, and that was by design. We heard from a couple of business owners who had seen the agenda prior to the meeting, and there was concern that there was going to be a vote last night to simply discontinue that service. I did have to respond to a couple of folks that actually the intent was to have that conversation in public in case there was a decision made to discontinue the service that would require customers to obtain their own sources of service. Again, the budget takes effect July 1st. So again, and this also impacts the internal operations of the town. Any change in operation we have to deal with and have to structure. Of course, one thing I'll note, in case anybody's concerned, is our intent all along has been to discontinue that level of service without requiring layoffs of our staff. And again, that goes back to the fact that so many of our staff are also performing other tasks, and we do have needs in terms of public works department's activities, one of which is parks, coincidentally enough, which we talked about earlier. And so the personnel that are specifically assigned to the transfer station will be absorbed into the public works department. They're going to keep their jobs and continue to work for us, just doing some other things. Unless, of course, they choose to use those specific skills they have elsewhere, which we would certainly understand. But that's the background to the discussion. Again, the concern raised was that this was kind of being done maybe behind closed doors. Absolutely not the intent. In fact, it was quite the opposite. The real purpose behind the discussion was to give people plenty of notice, first off of the issue itself, and also to give them time to make contingency plans if they needed to. We did hear from folks. In fact, I skipped over appearances before council. Mr. Jim Messier, who owns properties downtown and operates a business of his own, Arthur's Jewelry on North Bridge Street, spoke about his concern related to that, and that was earlier in the meeting. He said there seemed to be some concerns with Centertown or downtown, whatever you want to call it, in general. And one practical concern was if the town withdraws from the service, that requires not only individuals to find somebody else to do it, but it's also a separate bill that they have to pay, whereas currently the bill for that service is paid one time as part of the utility bill. In his comments, Mr. Messier stated that one of the main appeals of commercial development in our downtown is that they do contribute tax dollars to the community, which we appreciate. And he did suggest an alternative whereby the town adjusts its current way that it collects commercial trash. Currently, we provide commercial trash services twice weekly to the downtown area. And Mr. Messier suggested, which was a really wise thought as an editorial comment, that perhaps we could reduce that to 1 day a week. In our discussions last night, we acknowledged the merit of that suggestion. But again, given the fact that if it were a straight linear equation and we could cut in half our offerings, we would still be looking at a significant deficit. That monthly expense would be reduced to $75, but we'd still only be recovering $33. So council had a pretty robust discussion of the matter and directed staff to pursue withdrawal from the commercial residential business, but in a way that we can procure a private hauler through the town, whereby people would not have to scramble to find their own providers. They wouldn't be subject to whims of the market, or would be somewhat protected. And also, there would still be the opportunity to pay one bill. From my observation, that's exactly the kind of, I'm not going to call it compromise, but good idea and solution that I was hoping for from the staff perspective. And in addition to that, council also discussed the nature of the transfer station. So the outcome of all of that discussion was a motion by Councilman Foreman, seconded by Vice Mayor Updike, to direct town staff to procure a private hauler for commercial solid waste services, and also to issue bids to possibly do something different with our transfer station and scale operations. As the town manager that works at the will and pleasure of council and works for you to try to get the best deals, but also at the best level of service, I'm particularly gratified by council's action and also the input of the business community that informed that decision. And again, as a matter of background, there's still a process we have to go through. We're still working on the budget. This gives us greater clarity. We're going to work towards eliminating some cost from our budget through contracting. We know what that looks like. We are going to present the entire fiscal year 25-26 budget proposal at the council meeting on April 22nd. So if you can't make it in person, please tune in. Please make sure you watch the recording. We have a lot of challenges currently and long-term that we're trying to get ahead of with the budget, and we're going to present the proposal to do that on April 22nd in great detail. Following up on May 13th, there will be a public hearing on that budget proposal. And I made the observation last night that in terms of our operations, this might be one of the single most important activities we undertake. What's odd is that we have the same budget process every year. We have a public hearing every year on the budget. We very rarely hear from anyone. And we know that the budget, as our work plan for the year, is the thing that impacts citizens directly. So the public hearing for the budget will be May 13th. That meeting starts at 7 o'clock. So I would encourage you to attend. If you cannot attend, you can still submit comments and we will include those as part of the record and make sure council gets them. You can email me those at bwarner@bedfordva.gov, or you can call me at 540-587-6001 to make arrangements. But again, this is an insight, maybe more information than anybody wanted, into our overall budgeting process and what we're trying to accomplish. I will acknowledge up front that no process is going to be perfect. And so, again, that public hearing is important because there may be an idea expressed there that we simply haven't considered, even given our best efforts. So yours might be the idea that wins the day. And I think last night was a combination of Mr. Messier speaking up, some interactions with the business community and council, finding a solution that we think makes a lot of sense. But again, we want your input on that. That was the last item of new business. We did have a closed session last night to discuss personnel matters. Without saying too much, I can tell you that related to my relationship to the town and my employment contract. And what I will tell you, and I told this to council last night, is I consider it the greatest honor and privilege to serve as town manager. I appreciate this community and my neighbors so much. And I appreciate that sometimes we have to have some difficult decisions, but the nature in which you all do that with me, I appreciate. I hope you know that my goal is always to address your problem in a positive manner or to find solutions. I'm also open to criticism. and I appreciate the way in which people have interacted with me personally on a daily basis. When folks contact me, they're always polite. It's always focused on the facts. And sometimes we don't reach a solution that satisfies everybody, but I don't take those relationships for granted. And I think Bedford's a very special place. There's nowhere else I want to be. And I'm going to throw out a country music quote here in the words of David Allan Coe: "I'll hang around as long as you will let me." And without going into too much further detail, as the train goes by, which is also referenced in that song, by the way, that was the nature of the discussion. After we came out of closed session, we adjourned the meeting until 5:30 p.m. on April 8th for a budget work session. And council intends to dive into the numbers. The general fund is coming into greater focus. The solid waste discussion was a big part of that this year. Good clarity there, which we appreciate. The electric fund is still a challenge for us. As we mentioned, I think a couple of meetings ago, we have a $2 million cost coming towards us, and there's no really great way to address that. We know on the expenditure side, we have to absorb that. There are several ways we could do that, one of which is just to pass it along, which we really would rather not. One of which is to manage that through our price cost adjustment. Let me speak to that for a second. On your bill, you will see something called the price cost adjustment. That is a mechanism whereby we typically absorb large changes in our operation due to the changing nature of the electric business. We are obligated to buy power on your behalf. We have contracts to do that, but that also means we have to pay the rate no matter what it is at any given time, even though what we charge you is fairly constant. The PCA is designed to absorb the large costs that we don't see coming. And we implemented that, I want to say about 8 years ago, when we had another unexpected $700,000 expense that we did have to pass along that it affected our rates. So a lot of people have questions about the PCA. I'll describe it as a shock absorber for customers that offsets the impact of our system. Now, again, in this case, I'm going to go back to the $2 million cost. The shock absorber itself is a percentage, and so if we simply pass that cost along through the PCA, the average residential customer, as we define that, would see an increase of $24 per month, which we know is not palatable in this day and age. The other thing we're considering is that since it's a formula that takes effect by degrees, it has an even greater negative impact on our larger customers, including our businesses and industries. So when I mentioned that we have options, not all of the options are, actually at this point I'll say none of the options are particularly great for us. We do have some cash put away in our unrestricted net assets there that is designed for purposes of absorbing unexpected costs. But I will tell you, as of today's date, and I use that because cash flow is constant, and while you pay your bills, we're also paying bills on your behalf, and we get those at different points in time. The electric fund has $9 million in cash, but we are also aware of several pressures and demands on capital and operations whereby we don't want to blow through that money without giving it great discussion and scrutiny. So from the staff perspective, I can tell you our current approach to that $2 million expenditure is focused on some combination of those three methods that I just described. We could increase rates, we could pass it through the PCA, or we could go to our cash reserves to offset it. And that's part of the discussion we're going to be having with council at their next work session. If you stayed with me through the duration of this podcast, I very much appreciate your attention and patience. I feel like I've thrown a lot of information out. I hope that all of it's been relevant. At any time, if you have any questions, please contact me directly. Again, my email is bwarner@bedfordva.gov, and you can reach me at Town Hall during business hours at 540-587-6001. I can tell you there are a lot of challenges associated with our operation, but staff and the council that is currently before us is committed to trying to get ahead of those in a manageable way so that we don't simply kick the can down the road. Those are difficult, but I am blessed with extremely smart people. Candidly, they're all smarter than I am, who know how to address those issues, and I appreciate the direction of a council that's willing to take them on. Till next time, our next council meeting is April the 8th. Chief Moore will be joining us a day before then, so if you can come out at 10 o'clock on Monday, April 7th, you can meet him. But my plan, good Lord willing, is to join you on April 9th and provide a similar recap into the goings and functionings of what we consider to be the world's best little town.